Get started. First of all, thank you all for attending this webinar on safety training within the oil and gas industry. Before we get started, I would like to just point out that the session is recorded, so you will receive a recording of this post-event. The video content that you will see, the cameras of myself and the panelists over here, as well as the audio input from our side, will be, of course, switched on and off depending on who's speaking. So we limit disruption on that side. All the audio and video has been switched off for audience members in this case, just to make sure that the webinar runs smoothly. There will also be periodic polls that are pushed out to you in the audience, so please feel free to answer the questions. I think it will provide us with some great insights during the course of the conversation. And there will also be an opportunity to ask questions to any of our panelists, which we will reserve for the latter half of this webinar. To do so, you can select the Q&A function on Zoom, which in this case should be close to where you can select all the participants or view all the participants. As a host, it could look different to me, but there is a clear Q&A functionality there. So just to give a brief on the purpose of this webinar. So as VSTEP, as software developers for virtual simulation training tools, we thought it would be a great initiative to have our three panelists here today and exchange ideas and experiences on the use of virtual simulation within within safety training, and specifically within the oil and gas sector. I will maybe start off with a very brief introduction of myself, since I'm not, I'm just the moderator here. I don't want to be in the spotlight, but my name is Alexius Limius, and I'm a business developer for our response simulator tool at VSTEP. Been at the company for just over a year now. And we've our panelists now that I will introduce you have graciously given their time. Some are in the early morning hours, and some are in the late evening hours. So thank you in advance, Bruce, Nils, and Martin. Perhaps we can start with yourself, Martin.
Okay, hello everybody. As you know, my name is Martin. I was formerly with BP as the emergency response team leader at Sullombo Terminal in the Shetland Islands. It's a large crude oil terminal, managing up to 1.5 million barrels of crude per day at its height. I now run my own consultancy in fire and safety training for emergency response teams and incident management teams. And I've been aware, I was first introduced to Rescue Sim, which is the predecessor of Response Simulator, back in about 2012-13. Is that okay, Alex?
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Martin. Appreciate it. Nils, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Nils Knutstad with Chevron Shipping Company. I'm a former shipmaster in the chemical trade and also product world, and have been involved in training ship's crews and marine terminal operators for the past 15 or 20 years. And we use two of the VSTEP products. We use the response simulator and their ship simulator, which is called Nautis.
Thanks, thanks, Nils. Bruce?
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Bruce Wong. I'm the Capacity Development Advisor of the Resilient Advisor Network in the world. And in Hong Kong, I'm the Safety and Health Practitioner and responsible for the health and safety training. A few years ago, I also served for oil and gas company in Hong Kong as a health and safety officer in corporate level. So I had a little bit of experience experience in this field, and I'm also used the VR as a training tool for my safety training. So happy to share with you all about my experience today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Bruce. So as you can see, all our panelists here have current or past experience with virtual simulation tools. So what we'd like to dive into is mainly the that journey from going, let's say, from conventional safety training and clear issues or clear gaps that were identified in terms of the learning outcomes you could generate. So I thought as an initial topic, and please remember the point of this webinar is to have just a very open discussion and hear the experiences of our experts here today. So as a first point of discussion, perhaps you could give us some of your experiences with conventional safety training and the issues that you've faced in the past, Bruce. Bruce?
Yeah. So this first question is this: we would like to know which sector do you come from, and so can let us know what's your training need, and what do you want to us to share about our experience, so they can wrote the answer.
Yeah. So please feel free to answer that first poll over the course of the discussion. But maybe, Bruce, you could initially give us some perspective on the experiences that you've had, namely any, let's say, bottlenecks when performing conventional safety training, so practical safety training exercises.
Okay. Actually, when we conduct the safety training, we always use in the traditional methodology, such as the theory in classroom, and we have an exercise on site. But in the COVID-19 the crisis, actually it is difficult to conduct the on-site training and on the field, and very difficult to have a classroom training, because we need to maintain the social distance in the indoor. So I think it's a bit difficult time for every trainer in this field, but we cannot stop our safety training, because it's a very important and the basic level for FP workers in different workplace. So from my experience, VR is a very good method, very good tool for us, because we can one by one, or we can in the classroom during the theory training, or we can have a joint exercise in different room or in different center, because we can have join together in the virtual environment, and then we can use the VR, such as RS. We can play our different role in the tabletop exercise. So I think it is in the COVID-19 crisis, I think VR is a very good choice for us to maintain our table exercise and some theory training. Because we always now we are talking about the home office in Asia, so that if we cannot meet in the classroom, then we can meet in the virtual environment. So VR is a good choice, and RS can fill the training gap for us.
All right, thank you for that, Bruce. Nils, would you like to touch on what Bruce has just said now, or do you have something, or if you'd like to start off with your experiences first as well, and then maybe see if you can touch on to what Bruce has already said?
Sure. Well, we're attempting. First of all, I think what Bruce said is spot on. I mean, the virtual aspect of these tools has been a lifesaver during the pandemic. And of course, we're going to continue to use virtual training as well as instructor-led training is our plan as we return to the workplace. However, one of the things that we're using these tools for that may be a little different from the traditional method is that, well, of course, historically we trained everybody. we brought them to the classroom or to the fire field, and we told them what they needed to know. And then we had them do some exercises. And then at the end of the training, they'd get a certificate saying they were trained. And we've moved from that because most of the time we're training experienced professionals. What we're doing now using these tools is trying to learn what they know versus what they don't know. So we're very interested in assessing their competency at the front end of the training. And these tools allow us to do that. And then we're tending to train to close the gaps. We're identifying where the individual has gaps, where the group has gaps, where the industry has gaps, actually. And then spending our training dollars to close those gaps. So the concept of assessment is critical to this, and having a virtual world where you can put people in situations that you can't recreate or are difficult to recreate is incredibly valuable. So the concept of training, maybe flipping it over and saying, what do they need to learn? What do they think they need to learn? And then using assessments, pre-assessments. Then we have the exercises, if you would, and then we do post-assessments on the way out to help us understand how the learners are responding to the efforts.
Yeah, thanks, Nils. We'll probably touch on it later, but the concept of engineered failure is part of that assessment. I know that you're quite a proponent of that, so curious to hear more about that afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah, Martin, would you like to maybe go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, following on from what Neil said, proof of competency is far more important than having a certificate in your pocket from a training course many years ago. And yeah, I do believe that the virtual world has a strong part to play in proof of that competence. In a sort of a more practical sense in training, I was never actually allowed to set fire to the plant for a training exercise. So when you have a big exercise on your plant, all people see is in their mind, and everybody has a different interpretation of what they're actually looking at. So no matter how carefully you write an exercise scenario to try and describe, let's say, the size or the impact of a particular fire and its potential escalation, you never get the same actual mental picture in different people. And being able to, I've trained incident management teams and firefighters, and a lot of these people have never actually seen a very large event, fortunately, and we don't want to see very large events. And if we did have large events, could we actually all fly there and use them as training scenarios? Probably not. So really, to be able to actually show people what a large event looks like actually in their own plant is quite an eye-opener for a lot of people. You might have seen a jet fire on a fire training ground, but have you seen one simulated in your own plant? And it makes a huge difference. I have some colleagues in Sweden who use I think it's a very clever way of using the software, is that firefighters can go and train in the fire training ground practically with hoses, whilst the officers run a virtual scenario inside the classroom, which will become in the afternoon the joined up big exercise, and it'll be focused on their plant. And then we use the props out on the fire training ground to simulate what they were doing in virtual reality. And as well with virtual reality, you can, if the instructor poses a scenario, the people taking the course make a decision, you can either let that run or you can stop and say, would you like to consider a different method of escalation, or another mitigation that you could have tried, and use that to continue the training, and I think it's a really valuable way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think also if we take it back to the what Bruce also mentioned in classroom training, excuse me, when you're in that theoretical learning phase, most often than not, you'll as a visualizer, you'll have your conventional tabletop exercise where you have your handouts to inform you what the exercise will look like, and a PowerPoint presentation, or perhaps some photographs or even a video. And for me, because with my previous job and my previous experience in that role, there was always the question of why can't we see this in a more, with a more immersive aspect, right? Where we feel like we're inside that environment, where we have to actually strategize our next moves, right, to contain the incident. So for me, at least, that was one of the biggest takeaways when it comes to virtual training. I'm just curious, from your experiences, I mean, have you given tabletop exercises the way that I'm describing it now, with your PowerPoint, your video, or your photo, or a handout? How does that rate? Is that still something you use, even though you have virtual tools at your disposal?
Yes, we do. Quite often, it could be as little as you said, as a PowerPoint photograph that's been enhanced, maybe to show an oil spill or perhaps some flames on a unit. And it really just isn't that immersive or realistic.
Yeah. And but staying on that topic then, beforehand, what would be your training objectives by using that conventional method of a tabletop exercise, as opposed to a virtual reality, a virtual simulated environment?
Well, I can chip in there. I mean, the tabletop drill will always have its place, and it's necessary, particularly when people return to their facility, or for example, a ship's crew. They may not have access to that, and they need to practice practically with the kit that they have. They need to explore the spaces, see how much time it takes to move around in all those places, and to do that. So they're invaluable. They're a bedrock of training, and the virtual aspect just enhances that. As Martin pointed out, combining a virtual world and props or tools just expands the participants' ability to understand what the challenges are going to be, make them more valid, give them more temporal aspects, a better sense of time. How much time does things take? How fast does the fire accelerate? What impact does the wind have? If it's a spill, oil fire on water, what impact does the water temperature have on the fire? So there's a lot of things that can be dialed into the tabletop with the RS. And frankly, we're looking at the ability to take RS to these remote locations as well, and give the tool to people in their workplace. So I don't know if that helps.
Sure. Agree, because at the very beginning, when I joined the oil and gas industry, actually I don't know everything. So when I conduct the tabletop exercise, actually I don't know what did they do, because I really don't know the equipment and the response on authority and the what's not, because I remember that on that time I conduct the oil pollution exercise in somewhere in Hong Kong, but I don't know everything. So on that time we only use a picture, pre-record video to show what's going on. But if I can use the VR on that time, actually I can easy to understand the procedures and easy to understand what happened on that time, because I don't know everything. They just give me a few sentences about the situation, so I just only use my imagine. But all of you must know that your imagine is not same as my imagination. So it will have cause some little bit gap in the exercise. So I think VR can fill the gap.
Thanks, Bruce and Nils, for that. And in terms of key learning objectives, could you perhaps state some that are key to you personally. Perhaps we can see if there's, I think it might be interesting for the participants to see if there's any overlap or completely separate ideas, opinions on that. So feel free, Nils, perhaps if you want to go first.
Sure. Well, again, I think all of us on the panel here have been pushing the boundaries of traditional training. And the more we engage in that, the more aware we are of the limitations. And one of the observations we've made is we've really failed to harvest the learner data. What do the learners know? What are their capabilities? What do they want to know? What do they want to learn? You know, it's been this approach where somebody on high decides what everybody needs to know, the authority, the regulator, the business unit, and then that goes top down. And we're trying to turn that around and understand what the learners need to know. What do they want to know? What do they know? And harvest that data and use that on the back end and as we begin our planning. So we can say, okay, hey, look, there's a gap here. Nobody knows this. Why is that? So interesting observations, and we learn a lot about that, even about the regulations, for example, and some of the industry guidance. You know, we say, oh, that's not robust enough, or this isn't mentioned. And we're discovering these key critical learnings, gaps. We're finding where the learners have strengths. What do they want to know? So the learning objective piece of it, very important. We must decide what people are going to be able to do really when they finish the learning. However, we want to expand that and not pretend that we know everything about the topic, for example, or there are things that we may have missed. So we're driving it to be more learner-centric. Over to Bruce or Martin.
Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Okay, I agree, because the training objective or exercise objective is very important to coach us or direct us to how to deliver the content to the trainees. For example, in the virtual exercise, or actually it's a table exercise. For example, in my recently exercise, we would like to train our trainees how to respond the firefighting in the plant, but we can teach them the procedure. But I think the most important for the training objectives is we need them to know the consequence if they're failing to do the procedures. Because normally we teach them how to do the right thing, but actually it is difficult to teach them do the wrong thing, because in the real exercise, if they do something wrong, then will cause many troubles in the training or in the exercise. So I think BR can let us to fill the gap is we can project the negative consequence and the training, so that they will easy to remember why we need them to do the right thing, because if they fail to do, then it will cause a lot some damage or a loss of property, loss of lives. And so it will match the training objectives in the exercise and training.
Yeah. I can completely agree with that. And Martin, I don't know if you have something to add on to that.
Yeah, I agree with both Nils and Bruce. It's good we all agree today. But yeah, I think the main thing that I draw from the virtual scenario is the ability to increase the pressure on the candidates, to see how they react, to, as Bruce said, check that they have recognized a potential for escalation, how things can get worse by making the correct mitigations, how they can improve and reduce or even completely wipe out an escalation. And the pressure of being in that immersive virtual reality for people who are training and carrying out scenarios is much improved. If you do a normal desktop incident management team scenario that maybe takes once a week for about an hour and a half perhaps, you can see that sometimes you can actually put pressure on people just by twisting the scenario a little bit. But quite often they can enjoy it, and that's not a bad thing. Everybody likes to enjoy learning. But you don't see so many people in the virtual reality scenario. You see people having to actually think and take notice. It's when I've done it, it's modeled on your own plant or facility or ship, whatever, and it certainly brings increased pressure, almost increased caring about what happens, because it's not just a desktop. This almost appears if you are actually having a proper incident, and that's one of the main things for me.
Yeah, I can actually pull up a couple of images of, let's say, a digital twin we created for Zonvo Terminal in our predecessor, the product Rescue Sim. So I'll just share my screen here. Are you able to see it?
Yeah, I can see it. Do you want me to speak about that, Alex?
Yeah.
Okay, so when we first got Rescue Sim, as it was known then, we first intended it to be used for training incident management teams, not the firefighters. And our first model was basically flat Earth with a Google Earth image rendered onto it, and then individual tanks and buildings and process units sort of added on as photographs. But the teams could actually recognize that it was their plant. I mean, over the years, we spent some time developing this, and you can see top left there is a photograph of Zonvo Terminal taken from the air, and top right is the virtual reality. Once the site has been completely 3D rendered, that top one on the top right is the jetties, just from a slightly different angle. We've had process areas modeled. We had the jetties modeled, as you can see, bottom left, and bottom right there, there's a ship alongside with a small fire near the manifold. We can routinely take up ships up to about 350,000 tons. So it's a significant marine operation. And we were able to have the jetties modeled with working loading arms, with working fire monitors, with foam, etc. We also looked at the process area. We had certain areas of that modeled, and we had what they call intelligent structures created. So you can see top left there, there's a crude tank. That's an 80-meter diameter floating roof atmospheric crude storage tank. And it has, you can see in the background, the tanks look perfectly normal. There's also a scorched version of the tank, and then it can actually crumble and form a mouth there if you apply cooling incorrectly. On the top right and below it, you'll see a gas plant, which is in two states there. There is a third state where the tower has actually collapsed and some of the units collapse as well with thermal radiation. And the bottom left photograph is one of my former teams, firefighting teams, actually in the mess room at night running an exercise themselves. So I had a guy on each shift who was trained to facilitate the training and also to develop scenarios. But it was so recognizable as their own plant that it really brought home some lessons that you possibly wouldn't learn if you were at a third-party fire training ground dealing with a supposed jet fire or a tank fire.
Apologies, I forgot myself on mute there. Thanks, Martin. I think it's interesting you mentioned there the marine operation involved as well. So maybe that ties in nicely, Nils, to how Chevron are currently using both our solutions. And in fact, I actually have a video that shows both ends of that. So Nils, if you like, I can pop that up now, or I can do it later, as you please.
Sure. Why don't you show it first, if you don't mind, Alex? So while we're getting that up, just one thing to add to what Martin said is one of the advantages of this software is our ability to increase the frequency of training too. So typically we would send people, depending on your location, maybe annually or every 5 years, depending on what was the past practice, if you would. And now with these tools, you can send them more frequently because the cost is almost, well, in many cases, much less. This is the Nautis ship simulator. We have several of these in 2 locations, one in the US and one in the UK. And we train our in-house mariners on this. We have about 1,500 seafarers in our organization. And this is a side-by-side lightering operation where the 2 ships come together, and it gives you an idea. Of course, we can modify the weather, the wind. We can bring a team in. We also have a tugboat that they can operate. And we have several of these in one location, so we can locate them virtually and operate them virtually. So we've had our attendees come and operate the simulator from home, for example, access it off hours to where they can come in and do exercises and attempt things remotely. So that's been a big success, our ability to increase access to the training opportunities. And of course, the centerpiece of today's presentation, the RS simulator. Here's a clip from one of our marine terminal operator training exercises where we involve the terminal side of the team and the ship side. We bring them together in a virtual world, and they have challenges where they're going to have some not only emergencies but routine operations as well. So we're improving communications, we're improving procedures, and we're again starting to understand what the learners need to know. So the tools are really helpful there. To talk a little bit more about the shift in training, one of the things that we're adopting is the concept of engineered failure. And Bruce made the point that, hey, when you do something wrong, it has consequences, and what are those consequences? And there's a gentleman, an academic in the UK, his name is Nick Shackleton-Jones, who contends that we don't, our memory is really a collection of responses to events. So how we respond to things is really what we remember. And there's a lot of data to support his supposition. And so we've folded that into our training events. So we have engineered failures. In fact, we have them early on in the program where people walk into a scenario, they think they know what to do. And it's typically a high consequence, low frequency thing, right? So they know it could happen, but maybe they've never seen it in their career. And lo and behold, they walk in for what they think is going to be a routine communications drill, and this event occurs, and they respond to that. And of course, we're all there watching that, their colleagues themselves, and how do we do? And it's interesting. We've been doing this for quite a long time, and there's some reluctance in some circles that we never want the learners to fail. But in fact, that's maybe a barrier that we need to remove. And failure turns out to be maybe the best trainer of all. And I like the term fail forward, because the people who fail, invariably, they remember that event. They remember the context of it. They remember what they did do, what they didn't do. And typically, if you were to put them in that scenario again, they wouldn't repeat their failure. So we're using this kind of engineered failure with RS with the Nautilus ship simulators to expose these vulnerabilities and to say, hey, it's all right to be vulnerable. It's all right to fail if you can have a small consequence. And the trainers allow us to have that small consequence. So engineered failure, fail forward. Nick Shackleton-Jones, he's on YouTube, a wonderful resource if you care to take a look at him. I'll put it in the chat there.
Thanks for that, Nils. Very insightful. I think here at VSTEP we're quite a proponent now of that philosophy. So yeah, we're quite strong believers, and it's great that we can have a platform to sort of experiment with, right? So that's one of the greatest strengths of a virtual reality tool. You can repeat your exercises an infinite number of times, of course, within regulated hours, but the same exercise can be looked at from so many different angles, and it's really interesting. Bruce, do you have experience with that, where you've taken perhaps a single scenario and used it multiple times before?
Actually, yes, because it's not easy to develop a very good scenario. So I always use the same scenario for different trainees or staff. I think the most important thing is we can use the scenario, and we can add different consequence in the system, because normally we predict some actions for the trainees respond, but some trainees will have a different ideas, different in the different moment. So that when I gave some scenario is we did not input before, so that we can add it one and to in the system, so that when I reuse the scenario, then I will have one more new consequence to respond the trainees, because it will save more time, and it will let me know actually what they want to respond in their mindset, because we always talk about the human factor and the health and safety aspect, so that when we can know more about their actions or their ideas, we can easy to have a good reference when we review the safety procedures or contingency plan. That's the next one.
Yeah, and I think also one of the other important factors with such tools is the flexibility in terms of the training objectives you can achieve. So you've all touched on different sorts of objectives, but you can even take the point of view of a CCTV operator.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, there. I think you had prepared something regarding that aspect specifically.
Yes. Because for the CCTV operator, or actually on the video is about the staff in the control room, because if you read about the some incidents report of the oil and gas industry, the very important part is the response of the control room, because when they observe the situation, then they need to respond correctly. For example, in the video in the left hand side, when some they can see some fire, the operator in the control room should do follow their work instruction to for example evacuate the staff, or turn on the alarm, contact the contingency plan. For example, in the video, you can see the internal firefighting team to detect the situation, and the contact the emergency service to for the reinforcement. That is very important. So in the RS, they can simulate the situation in the control room in plant, so that they can train their and enhance their awareness in the situation, and also they can add different roles, such as the some staff they can turn on the the device for the to protect other tank, and they can also train the contingency plan and the emergency team. Because just like in Hong Kong, because we normally in Hong Kong we have a very small oil and gas plant, so that our firefighting team is not the regular. It is that this the second duty for the other staff, so that when they need to have the training to train their mindset in the situation, in the different situation. And in Hong Kong, we are very focusing on the downstream business, so that we are very concerned about the driving safety and the situation when they deliver our product on the street, and especially in the urban area. So that, for example, in this scenario, we can also have joint training or joint exercise with the emergency service, so that we will know what their work procedures and how the oil and gas industry to cooperate with the emergency service. So because normally we also have a joint exercise, but we won't have a set of fire on the street, so that we seldom don't understand their work procedures, and same case, they also don't know our procedure in the incident, so that we can use the RS to have a joint exercise to know each other, and then to review and make our contingency plan more better and better.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And in terms of, so you're mentioning joint training there, let's say perhaps multi-role or multi-agency aspect, depending on the scenario you've developed. In the case of a strategic conceptual trainer like RS or any other similar tool out there, from my experience, I would say about 80% of the training is focused on the communication aspect. How essential is that to your to the sector, right, and that you operate in? So namely, as safety professionals or safety practitioners, how important is that aspect?
Actually, you're right. The communication is very important in the emergency situation. But I think another more important is how can we have dialogue in the situation in different incident, because the fire service will have the work procedures. For the private company, we have our own procedures. For example, our truck driver, when they have a fire, how can they what should they do to contact the 999 to contact the emergency service, and how can then what should they report, and what should they report to their supervisor? It is actually it is seldom to conduct in the real situation. And when the fire service arrive, how can they how to cooperate with them? Or for example, we always teach our truck driver, you should provide some data to the fire service. But actually, I don't know what kind of data should we provide is more important, because we have a checklist, and we have have a lot of data sheet, so that should we read all to the firefighters, but it is a very critical time. They need to have a conduct the firefighting to detain the fire. So I think in the joint exercise, and we know our work procedures, and the fire service tactic is also important. When they arrive, turn on the jet, which direction, then we need to know, because the truck driver need to stay in the safety side area to for reporting and the coordinate with the fire service. And the fire service side, they also need to know the chemical data, or what the driver role. The police officer also need to know when how far away they need to cordon. So I think in the joint exercise in the RS is not only the communication. The most another important thing is I need to know what did they do on the site. Which every agency, they have their own work, but what will they conduct, and we need to verify in the tabletop exercise or in the virtual exercise. So that's what I think.
Thank you, Bruce. Does anyone have something to add on top of that? Or otherwise I can follow up.
I think just briefly, I would say that I don't think I've ever run an exercise where communications weren't an issue. In the UK, the emergency services have a joined up communication method called JESIP. They all speak the same language and use the same procedures, but the oil industry doesn't. And yeah, I've been fortunate enough to witness a couple of multi-agency exercises, one in the UK in Cheshire and one in France, actually, where using different rooms and using VR, all the different agencies were able to input to one operation, and it was a really useful exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And just staying on that topic then, Niels, from your perspective, because you have our Nautis simulator, but you also have Response Simulator. Have you ever tried to run a sort of combined training where perhaps you have an incident on a deck and at the same time running one of the full mission bridges? Has that, or if it hasn't popped up in your mind yet, would that be something you believe could work?
Well, no, it's been done and continues to be done. And as Martin knows, we have these very large drills in the oil industry. We'll have several hundred people for, let's say, loss of a containment with a large tanker. And we've used simulation. We've actually had a simulator with the ship's crew on the simulator. And then we've had the participants, it's a 3-day event, maybe, anywhere from 300 to 500 people at this thing. And then the participants can fly over the scene with a helicopter. We have oil spill simulations that tell us the drift and trajectory of the spill. We have simulators that will look at logistics. We need to move spill response equipment around an urban area. It combines traffic and weather and all these types of things. So the virtual world is really a powerful tool to help us understand, where we're well organized and where we need to spend our time and energy, because these things are of course incredibly difficult, and I think one of the beauties of these complex things where people can see is we understand the importance of prevention, right? To Bruce and Martin's point, you let the things get away from you, and now we're talking about mitigation. We're not talking about, we've already had damage and we're going to continue to have more damage, more risk, more loss of life, more injury, whatever. We need to figure out better ways to prevent these events. So these tools all come together, prepare us to respond, and also help us understand the importance of prevention.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I think you hit the nail there. I see, just looking at time, I'm very aware of everybody's time, including our participants here. So I thought we could maybe move on to the Q&A section, or part of this call, of this webinar. There is one here from Kenneth. So good evening. One issue with regards to VR is its acceptance and accreditation by the industry and the authorities. How far ahead are we with regards to this?
Well, I can talk briefly about the ship simulator. Those are, we have an international standard, which is driven by the International Maritime Organization, the subset of the UN, which really represents the international framework for the shipping world. And the Nautis simulator meets those requirements as a full mission bridge, which underpins the regulatory training. So the tool does meet that regulatory perspective. The other one is typically in the marine world, the training that has to be, required by the regulator, that has to be approved by the regulator, this would be a part of that. So in some cases, the simulator has to be an approved tool. In some cases, it doesn't. So if we were to put together a fire training course, for example, that would meet an industry regulation, we could use RS. The course would be approved by the regulator. They would review the content and the structure of the course, and then we could use RS within that regulatory framework. Beyond that, I couldn't speak to the regulatory success of RS.
To answer on behalf of VSTEP in this case on that question, you are absolutely right in terms of let's say the issue around acceptance and accreditation in the industry. What we have seen though are specific cases, unfortunately isolated cases. So to give an example, with STCW for advanced firefighting, we're able to meet the criteria set there using our software. If you also look at the National Safety Institute here in the Netherlands, that conducts sort of refresher training for incident commanders, they use our software as an examination tool. So if you pass, you are officially ready to go back out there again. But it's really case by case. Unfortunately, there isn't indeed a international standard. And I see that Martin has his hand ready to go.
Yeah, I was just going to just one point, a point that Niels raised earlier on, that this is another training tool in the box. It doesn't actually take away from anything else. It adds, it adds benefit, and it is not to be taken on its own, I don't think. You're quite right that in international firefighting worlds, there are lots of different standards, and they would need to be individually assessed. But this is another training tool to be used together with live fire training, for example.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Thank you. Kenneth, I hope we've answered your question there. I'll move on to the next one. So what are the main benefits or differences between virtual simulation training and virtual reality training? I'm happy to answer that one, but if anyone here would like to. Okay, so I'll take this one up. The main difference with that is when you're talking about virtual reality training, most often than not, the word is easily interchanged with the solution we provide, right? So with virtual reality training, you're mainly looking at a procedural or operational training with a headset on, right? So really that immersive first-person view. Within oil and gas sector, it could be where, for example, you are able to interact with the environment around you, so you can turn levers, you can press certain control panels, which will have an effect. So that's a type of virtual reality training. With virtual simulation training, which is more what we focus on here, you're looking at it also in a virtual environment, right? It can be with a headset, but it's a conceptual trainer. It's more of a strategic tool. So there will be levels of interaction, though limited. But for example, you will not pick up a fire extinguisher and extinguish a fire yourself as a student. That's mainly the difference. You're simulating a specific incident, a specific scenario. So I hope that clears it up. And if anyone, Martin, Nils, Bruce, if you'd like to add on that, or if you disagree with me, perhaps, that's also fine.
No, I think that's a good explanation, Alexios. There is, of course, a new wave coming of AR, augmented reality, where you can wear a headset in real life and create virtual issues in front of your very eyes, which is a whole new ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's becoming more and more, let's say, they're starting to build sets for commercial use for the average person, right? So I think once we enter that step, which was the exact same with virtual reality, we'll see it a lot more in the near future, to be honest. Yeah, augmented reality, it's a great topic. I'm seeing another question here. So we know a lot about distance education, but distance training is a new term. Can you give us more of an idea about the subject, especially since training needs to monitor and evaluate the behavior of trainees towards specific situations?
Well, I'll weigh in there. The beauty of the simulators, we can record it, of course, right? So we can, instead of the instructor evaluating the participant's success or failure and then feeding that back to them, we can go back and the participant can witness their own behavior. And this is a powerful tool because it's not us telling them that they made a mistake or they got something right. They get to reinforce the correct and incorrect behavior, see that themselves. So the virtual tools all have recording capabilities. And typically what we'll do is we're doing a pre-assessment where we put them in a scenario where, like I said, they're probably going to fail. And then we're going to watch that failure. And then as we go through the training and we build skill and knowledge, we come out on the other side and we say, okay, let's put them back in a similar scenario, one with the same challenges, but different perspective. You know, they're going to need the same knowledge and skill to succeed. And we watch how they manage that. Invariably, they're highly prepared to manage these situations where they failed. You know, because when they fail, they're pulling the information instead of us pushing it. Right. So we're able to go run them through another series of exercises, which checks their competency, and we can all watch their success. And again, that's a very powerful motivator because they see their success and they see how they've failed forward and mastered the necessary skill. So I hope that helps. But we can do it all. We can do it from the distance now over the internet. We don't have to be in the same room or the same space, although we intend to return to some of that as the environment opens up around the world, but we're going to continue to do the virtual instructor-led training as well. Anyone else?
Bruce, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think no matter this distant learning distant education or distant training, I think the most important is we can when we use the VR technology, then we can have a real time to observe the trainees, the behavior and respond in the scenario. For example, we set out fire on the street. As a commander, the trainees, what will they do? They will start the firefighting or cordon the street, or they evacuate the people on the street, or they change the traffic direction. They need to know, so that in the distance training or distance education, I think the first point is real time, because if it's not real time, and it's difficult to observe the behavior or the performance. And the second thing is they need to have a real time response, so that the trainees can have timely coaching, or even not in coaching, let the trainees do, no matter is the right direction or wrong directions, and then we can refer to the recording. Then we can let the trainees know, they did it wrong, or they did it very good, or something for improvement. And if there is different trainees and in the training program, they can observe each other to have a better idea and some good practice from each and other trainees. So I think it is I think the most important part is a real-time training.
Yeah, absolutely. There are two more questions. We're 1 minute away from having to stop the webinar. So if we could maybe be a bit brief on these answers, although great questions here. So the first one I'll read off is, could you kindly brief about how to check effectively that whether the workers, or I think it's students in this case, are well equipped after virtual training or not? So I think that relates to what was mentioned regarding proof of competency at the start.
Yeah, what Neil said about fail forward. If you catch somebody during an exercise, they make a decision, things start to go wrong, you can stop there and say, how do you feel about that decision? You can learn from that failure and fail forward, as Neil says.
And I would add too that one of the things that we're embarking on is retention. So we typically have some type of knowledge test and skill assessment as we complete the training. And now we're looking at testing a 1 month. We asked the participants to volunteer for that. Would they subject themselves to another test? And maybe it's 6 months. So we want to see if we can start to get more data about the learners. This learner-centric data aspect is something that we're very interested in driving forward on the learning experience platforms, use of simulation, to try and understand the learners better so we can provide them with more valuable use of their time.
Yeah, thank you, Nils. And we have a final one here. Can we use Move technology, that's Move spelled M-U-V-E, in distance training? I'm not sure if you've heard of Move technology. That's a question to the panelists over here.
I have not.
Okay. Unfortunately, Faisal, perhaps you could also elaborate on that as I move to the final question here. That would be appreciated. Also, if we could have examples of virtual simulation being implemented at oil and gas majors for safety training.
Yeah, in BP we used it on a regular basis for training both incident management teams and tactical response teams on the ground.
Thanks, Martin. Nils, you currently work for an oil and gas major?
Well, of course. I mean, we are using, we have our ships modeled, our specific ships, so they can experience those in the ports that they go into. And again, from a drill perspective, we're doing that. We also have what we call digital twins of operating plants, for example. So there's the real world model with telemetry feeding a simulated version of the same thing. So yes, it's the oil and gas industry is pushing this, actively pushing this and trying to leverage these tools.
I could probably also add that, as I've mentioned, my colleagues in Sweden, they use it on a regular basis in fire training schools to train with Swedish refinery operators.
Yeah. All right, and just circling back to that previous question on whether we can use Move technology. So that's multi-user virtual environments. So can we use that in distance training?
Well, I can answer that quickly. Yeah. We just recently did that. We had a ship handling course with participants in the US, the UK, in Europe, Eastern Europe, and actually on a ship off of Costa Rica. So we had everybody spread around the world, and we were all operating the system together jointly over the internet. So we've been able to do that successfully. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I can imagine also with that, what we were mentioning earlier with, let's say, multi-role and multi-agency training within RS itself, that's a possibility. I think more and more tools are adopting that, whether it's built into the software, whether it's in the cloud. I think COVID has taught us a lot over the last few months. So definitely things are moving in that direction, Faisal. Thank you for that question. I'll unfortunately need to end the talk here. If anyone would like further information or to get in touch with any of us after this call, please feel free to let us know. We will also be sharing the recording, so you will receive an email from us with a recap of what's been discussed. So I hope it's really been fruitful for everybody that's participated here today. Thank you again so much for clocking in, despite maybe being, let's say, off hours. Special thanks, of course, to our panelists that have made time for this. So I really, really appreciate it, everybody.